Imagine being cut open without anesthesia, exposed to lethal radiation, or used as a living experiment for chemical warfare. These aren't the plots of horror films. They're real-life nightmares inflicted on innocent people in the name of science and power. Today, we're uncovering the shocking truth behind some of the most disturbing human experiments in history. Brace yourself for the darkest side of science. You may never see the world the same way again. Let's start our journey back in the 4th century BC Greece, where curiosity about the world was at an all-time high. While many were interested in the mechanics of the universe, one man, Greek physician Herophilus, was obsessed with the workings of the human body. After studying at the Hippocratic Medical School, Herophilus moved to Alexandria, Egypt, where he teamed up with another physician, Erasistratus. Together, they laid the foundations of human anatomy. But how did they gather such groundbreaking information? Well, they didn't study just corpses. They performed live dissections on condemned criminals, often in public. Yes, these vivisections were done without anesthesia, so the victims felt every agonizing slice. Herophilus meticulously documented the human body's functions, from intestines to motor nerves, often damaging organs purposefully to study their roles. His work was revolutionary, even though it came at the cost of unimaginable human suffering. Sadly, all his findings were lost when the Library of Alexandria was destroyed by fire. Fast forward to 1954, when the United States was conducting nuclear tests in the Pacific Ocean. As part of Operation Castle, a thermonuclear bomb called Castle Bravo was detonated in the Marshall Islands. It turned out to be 2.5 times stronger than expected, causing severe radiation fallout that affected the local population. Instead of evacuating these residents, the U.S. government decided to conduct a secret study, Project 4.1, to observe how humans respond to high levels of radiation. 239 Marshallese residents, exposed to intense radiation, developed symptoms like hair loss and skin damage within days. Many women suffered miscarriages and stillbirths, while children born later faced developmental problems and thyroid cancer. Over the next 20 years, many developed significant tumors, with 1/3 of the exposed population showing severe health complications by 1974. When the Marshallese raised accusations of intentional exposure, the U.S. government denied responsibility. Now let's visit the early years of the Soviet Union. In 1921, before the Soviet Union was officially formed, they set up a secret poison lab known as the Chamber. Here, Soviet scientists tested lethal poisons on prisoners from various labor camps. Their mission? To create the perfect, undetectable poison, colorless, odorless, tasteless, and untraceable in autopsies. Prisoners were often given these poisons under the guise of medical treatments. The poisons included cyanide, which caused heart attacks and violent seizures, and curare, a muscle relaxant that induced death by suffocation. The ultimate creation was a substance called C2, which killed victims within 15 minutes without the dramatic symptoms of poisoning. The Soviet Union claimed to have shut down this lab after its dissolution in 1991, but many are skeptical. Next up is a particularly dark chapter in U.S. medical history, the Guatemalan Syphilis Experiment conducted between 1946 and 1948. More than 1,300 Guatemalan citizens, including children, were involuntarily infected with syphilis and gonorrhea. Many of these subjects were patients in hospitals and mental institutions with no idea that they were part of an experiment. Doctors, led by Dr. John C. Cutler, even used infected sex workers to transmit diseases to healthy individuals. Dr. Cutler often neglected keeping accurate medical records, and many patients were left untreated after being infected, suffering horrifically. One case involved a woman named Berta, who was injected with syphilis, later developed scabies and endured painful lesions. In her final days, Dr. Cutler reinfected her with syphilis and gonorrhea, leading to her death just days later. The overall goal was to see how effective penicillin was in treating STDs, but tragically, very few participants received proper treatment. The U.S. didn't formally apologize to Guatemala until 2010, over 60 years later. And finally, we arrive at Unit 731, possibly the most infamous case of human experimentation during World War II. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research facility run by the Japanese during the Sino-Japanese War in World War II. It was located in Harbin, China, and is responsible for some of the worst atrocities committed in human history. The prisoners, most of them Chinese and Russian, were subjected to gruesome experiments, often without any scientific purpose beyond morbid curiosity. Victims were deprived of food and water, frozen to death, hung upside down, or injected with animal blood. Some were dehydrated until they resembled mummified remains. Pregnant women were infected with diseases to study their effects on unborn children, and in some cases live dissections were performed to extract fetuses. These experiments often led to unspeakable suffering and death. When the war was ending and Soviet forces were closing in, the Japanese government tried to cover up their atrocities by killing the remaining prisoners and demolishing the facility. But here's the twist: many of those responsible for these war crimes were never brought to justice. Instead, the United States struck a deal with Japanese officials to obtain the data from the experiments, granting immunity to the perpetrators. Though the Soviet Union pursued trials, only a few were sentenced, and most of the heinous acts carried out by Unit 731 remain hidden under layers of secrecy. And there you have it. 5 of the most horrifying human experiments ever conducted in the name of science, power, and military superiority. The atrocities committed in these cases serve as stark reminders of what happens when ethics are discarded in the pursuit of progress. It's a grim look into the dark side of human nature, but it's important to remember so we can ensure history never repeats itself. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for watching.